at the end of 2020, I drew a happy-go-lucky duck on a confused moose's head and thought, alright, this is the funniest thing I've drawn in a long time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another You May Contributorverse. I'm Josh Munkin, alongside co-host Brenna Jenneret and our podcast wizard John Seymour, and we are here to bring you a wonderful conversation with not a possum, as you might think by looking at his social media avatar, but actually Kirk Reedstrom, author, illustrator of 3 graphic novels for young readers out this year, starring a duck and a moose named Duck and Moose. Kirk was an absolute blast to talk to, and we go into a whole bunch of detail about his process, his road to publication, how Duck and Moose came together as a series, and his journey to, the Kirk that we love and respect as a possum today. So I'll get out of the way of the conversation. But first, wanted to mention a couple of things about our sponsor, Tealmore Press, who has a whole bunch of books out this year, I believe 5 or 6 at last count, the latest of which are a couple of books featuring 2 different types of moon. So I would go and check out the books Supermoon as well as Naked, which on its face does not feature a moon, but as soon as you see the cover and then open the book, you'll understand where that's coming from. Check out everything that Tealmore has going on at tealmorepress.com, including, again, Supermoon and Naked, both graphically excellent, both featuring superhero flavors of protagonists and both delights to read. So again, tealmorepress.com. And now we will get into our conversation with Kirk Reedstrom, author illustrator of the Duck and Moose series. Here's Kirk's verse.
Cool.
We can't lose any of this precious upfront chaos.
Yeah, right, because what will our listeners think if we come in all prepared and stuff?
Yeah, no kidding.
Right? Well Kirk, thanks for coming on. Yeah, sorry, what were you going to say?
It's so nice to actually see you all. I just know you from your avatars.
Yeah, right?
It's not actually me. As you can see, I'm an absolute mess, only suitable for audio.
Yeah, you might notice that I'm not, in fact, a cartoon possum. Which is,
true.
Disappointed just about every interviewer I've talked to.
I thought something was off and I couldn't place it, but now that you say it, yeah. It's no
possum's
possum.
Just in my heart.
Right. Nice.
I was walking my dog the other night and saw a possum, and it played dead, literally right in front of us. Those guys are some gremlin-looking dudes. You draw them very lovingly and affectionately, but he could not have given me a dirtier side-eye grimace.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Uh-huh.
Yeah. For the listening audience, Kirk in real life does
been...
not have a side-eye grimace.
Should have just carried some ticks with you. They like to eat the ticks.
Yeah,
gross.
Right. But good for us. Good for us, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna mess with a possum. I appreciate how precious they are, precious contributors to our ecosystem. Anyway, Possum Hour. Why is there a particular reason you are a possum online? You just like them?
You know what? That's such a great question.
I didn't expect it to be a great question.
Or maybe a question I hadn't thought that deeply about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny.
You need no better reason than that, my man.
That's fair. Yeah, that's totally fair. Well, Kirk, let's jump in and talk about Duck and Moose, because I love these books. I got them in the mail, and I mean, just the picture on the front, like that first cover. So for the listening audience, you obviously can't see, but Duck is like in between Moose's horns or antlers, making a house. So let's talk about Duck and Moose. Like, how did you come up with that idea? Because it's like kind of perfect. This obnoxious duck is trying to build a house there, and Moose is just like, seriously.
Yeah, because this is not wildlife. You're in like New Orleans or somewhere down south.
I'm in Shreveport, so northwest Louisiana.
Yeah,
we're like 20 minutes away from East Texas and 20 minutes away from South Arkansas. So we're filled with a lot of characters here. But I drew Duck and Moose for the first time in like the end of 2020. And actually, let me back up a little bit more, because obviously there aren't any moose around Northwest Louisiana.
Yeah, right.
We've got a couple alligators, but we don't have just moose roaming around the streets.
Right.
I went on a family trip to Alaska in 2017. It was 5 Reedstroms. So my dad, my brother, his girlfriend, my wife, and me crammed into a van and roaming the Alaskan wilds, as you do. And we got to go up to the Denali National Park and got stuck by a family of moose. So I got to just, stare at them for a while. And when I came back to Shreveport, I wanted to incorporate some of the animals that I had seen in our Alaskan trip, and none of them worked very well. I tried a whole bunch of different animals. One book had like a walrus and some puffins. I tried a husky. None of them quite worked.
Yeah.
And then at the end of 2020, I drew a happy-go-lucky duck on a confused moose's head and thought, all right, this is the funniest thing I've drawn in a long time. And I took bits and pieces of other books that hadn't worked, and the story came pretty quickly. I actually made it as a 40-page picture book at first, and I tried using watercolor. So I changed the style on the books like 4 times.
Incredibly different than the final product, for sure.
Yeah. So I also made the decision to leave my first literary agent at the end of 2020, and with my new agent using the new book that I had written, Duck Moves In, and we sent it out, and nobody wanted it for like a year.
In its picture book form, right?
In its picture book form, And she ended up sending out a completely different book about a couple of penguins that found a potted plant, and hijinks ensues, and it...
Obviously, that's what would happen.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So that went onto the desk of Regan Winter, my now editor at Disney, and they said, oh, you know what, this is pretty funny, but we don't really like this book. Does Kirk have anything else? And so Anna Crespo, my agent, sent everything I had ever done.
Right?
Then,
take your pick.
Yeah. And so that included the picture book version of Duck and Moose. And they're like, oh, we think these characters are pretty funny, but have you considered turning it into a graphic novel? And I said, well, yeah, of course I have. Thanks so much for asking. Give me a couple weeks and I'll see what I can do. And so I turned in... a 64-page early reader graphic novel that looks a lot like story-wise, it looks a lot more like the finished version of Duck Moves In. And then they asked if I had other ideas for other adventures for the characters. And I said, yeah, of course I do. I'm so glad you asked. And give me another couple of weeks. We'll see what happens. And so somehow Agent Anna turned a rejection into a 3-book deal with Disney Hyperion. And here we are.
It's as easy as that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the real timing? Not obviously. I mean, it's a 64-page early reader graphic novel. It's not a couple of weeks. Like, what was that negotiation like? Really?
For writing the book, for writing the whole book, or for...
Okay, so what I'm interested in pulling apart is the negotiation that there seemed to have been, where this isn't right for us. Give us something else to work with. Let's retool this, because you don't get that opportunity very often. I mean, let alone turning it into a 3-book deal with Disney Hyperion. But I mean, just for that first story, what were those interactions like?
Yeah. Okay. So I signed with Anna with the picture book version in maybe 2021, I think, early 2021. Mm-hmm. She had some revisions on the story too, so we went over a couple revisions. That was the first time I used ink, so I used little micron pins to do the art. Then in 2020, I think it was 2022, or in February, is when we heard back about Disney not wanting the Penguin book and asking what else I had. So maybe end of February, they wanted to see what else I had, and we sent in pretty much everything else.
The entirety of the Alaskan wilderness.
Yeah, my whole body
lovingly.
of work. You build up. I had like 6 years worth of book dummies that didn't go anywhere. So we sent that in, and then I think it was like March and April. It basically was a whole season. So like February to May is when we were going through revisions and sending work before they offered a book deal.
Wow. Okay, so I want to back up just a little bit. So you left your first agent back in 2020, and without going into it too much, was it just like wasn't working and things weren't selling?
Yeah,
and so
we
you
just weren't a
decided
great
to
fit.
Switch. Okay.
Yeah, we weren't a great fit. That agent still doing great work, has a bunch of great clients. I knew I needed a little more hand holding. And so I figured you might as well rip the Band-Aid off. And it was, if you all remember what the end of 2020 was like, I thought I had was making the worst decision ever.
Right.
I figured I might as, we had been working together for about 4 years and not really getting any traction. So I figured the thing that needed to change was me. So we left. I had a couple of months to reevaluate my life decisions and work on new books.
Yeah.
And to regret. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I signed with Anna during, I think it was PB Pitch Party, one of the Twitter pitch parties.
Yeah.
Back when Twitter pitch parties were a thing.
Yeah, right back before they died. Sure.
Yeah. Duck Moves In was one of them. And then I had another book that I had in my back pocket, too.
Awesome. Yeah, and I only, thanks for sharing. I only ask because I feel like, that happens a lot, and it's not, necessarily anybody's fault. Like, it's not, just like you said, it's not a good fit, or you feel like, yeah, like you said, like, maybe you need more hand-holding, or you just, whatever. So I was interested in, the switch, and it sounds like, it ended up working out for you because then you sort of went out with something new and then were able to get an agent that was more sort of hands-on, which is what you wanted. But so to piggyback that question, I was going to say, I've heard great things about Reagan Winter over at Disney Hyperion. So what is it like, or what has it been like working with her?
Yeah, it's been a dream. She's great. And it's pronounced Regan.
I'm sorry, Regan.
Oh no, it's
yeah.
Totally good. I made that
Regan,
mistake the first time we met.
Regan, come on the podcast and we'll pronounce your name correctly.
I know, right? I was
for an
going to say
entire hour.
In case she's listening. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
No, she's great. She's so insightful. The edits that she has are things I never would have thought about. So the books are so much better. They're so much better because of Anna and Regan. So they both of them have keen editorial eyes. Regan championed the books too, and she goes for my really weird out there sense of humor, which is nice. That,
right? Totally. No, as somebody who writes sort of like you feel like anyways you're writing these sort of like weird quirky ideas that just aren't the norm, and so you're just like, well, I don't know if it's not the thing that's getting published, is this gonna work for me? And you sort of have to just lean into it, and then you end up finding, a great editor that also thinks you're hilarious, and you're like, oh, thank God. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and, we were able to, keep in je ne sais quoi in an early reader graphic novel.
Which I was very impressed. We gotta talk about that.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of creator buddies want to get into the early reader space, too. And, there's a perceived rule of word use or word choice that you can have, right? Because you want to have a bunch of sight words in there that match well with the curriculum for grades 6. Not grade 6, ages 6 to 9, so grades 1 through 3. And sometimes that looks like Jack and Jill books. I went story first and said, all right, somebody who knows more than me is going to tell me that I've crossed a line and I need to pull back.
French
I'm just not going to
a bridge too far. Yeah.
And karaoke and stuff like that. I figured I would throw in, since it's a graphic novel, there are lots of illustrations, so there are sight clues for what's going on. And the reader, kids are smarter than we give them credit for, and they can ask their teacher or start a conversation with their parent or caregiver, And this might have been familiar to you all when you were growing up, but if you ran into a word you didn't know and asked what it was, somebody might say, well, you should look it up. So it's a
Yes.
good opportunity to learn some new vocabulary.
I remember, I mean, this puts me firmly in mind of being a kid and reading Peanuts comic strips and the amount of time that Charlie Brown would say good grief. I had no idea. I had no frame of reference for what that word meant, nor were my parents properly equipped to explain to me what grief means at the time. So you picked some better, some maybe more suitable language to push.
Yeah. I was a big Calvin and Hobbes fan. So I picked up a lot of weird words thanks to Bill Watterson.
Yeah,
and
totally.
It's very, I mean, especially Moose, the second book about Moose playing astronaut is very sort of Spaceman Spiff-esque. From the spaceship design to, the Zany antics and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my first original characters when I was in elementary school was a guy named Space Tourist Tim, which had nothing to do with Spaceman Spiff.
Of course. No IP issues
Who would have
whatsoever.
thought?
Amazing. So you had originally just been doing picture books, is that right? Like you hadn't really done any graphic novels or early reader, obviously, since that was, they were like, let's do this. So that's sort of 2 extra layers to put your picture book into. So I guess my question is, what was that like? You talked a little bit about the early reader part, but then as far as the graphic novel part, how did you ever think of doing that before with any of your other picture book dummies? Like was that something you wanted to dip your toe in and you just hadn't yet? Or how did that happen?
Yeah. I actually had been thinking about it. In fact, I had been working on a really weird webcomic that I was going to try to do.
Awesome.
And so I had, and in early 2020, I had started making mini comics zines that started getting traction. So if you all remember, I've got them around here somewhere, but you fold one sheet of paper into an 8-page little booklet, and so I would do diary comics because I needed to be able to finish something during the pandemic to stay sane. I was like, okay, maybe I should dip my toe into comics. It had always been really intimidating to me because they're very long and tedious. But then the early reader graphic novels started coming out, and I saw books like Narwhal and Jelly and Waffles and Pancake were another one. I liked the Narwhal and Jelly was kind of like an in-between chapter book and comic book.
Very light sequential art. Yeah.
No, that's a good point, because it sort of fills that gap in between, because they are a little bit longer, like a little bit more.
Yeah, so I was always making 40-page picture books because I liked having more space to work with. So I thought, okay, maybe I can try working in this other format. And so then I went to my local public library and checked out every single early reader I could find. So tons of Mo Willems stuff. But then I found, or I rediscovered James Marshall's early readers. So like George and Martha.
Gerald,
are your ears burning?
Yeah, if you're listening. I don't know if you've seen, Kirk, but Gerald Connors has a James Marshall book coming out. Did you see? It was just
I saw.
Very exciting.
Yeah. I saw a very early version of it. It's so good. I'm very excited that it's out or going to be out into the world.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so I started reading the Fox books, and I completely forgotten about them until I opened it up and read it and was just hit with a sense memory of series that was really important to me as a kid. I loved his understated humor. I liked his wonky line work. And he had, just enough sarcasm hidden in those books. They were great. And then I started rereading a bunch of, the Frog and Toad books, Arnold Lobel's other stuff too, Leo Leone's early readers.
Man, you're going back in your research.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like to go as far back as I can, and then sprinkle it with books that are actually being published now, because a lot of those earlier books would never be able to be published today. I mean,
Absolutely
things
not.
like James Marshall's The Stupids Die. That's
Yes.
that's not going to be published today, but is one of my favorite books.
Yes, and I think Fuse 8 and Kate, Betsy Bird's podcast, they do that one, and that was exactly their thought, essentially, like, in a nutshell. Like, this is not okay. Like, this would never be okay today, but...
Would kids love it? Sure. Absolutely,
I'm sure they would. Yeah, no, totally.
But yeah, so I had been reading all of that stuff. I had been trying to do a webcomic, so I was playing around with doing panels and changing up my own production method. We also bought an iPad, so I was doing digital sketches for the first time. I actually did the final art traditionally for the Duck and Moose books, but I would do all the sketches digitally because I could go a little faster.
Awesome.
Which is especially incredible because, I mean, the line work is extremely precise, but also in some places extremely purposefully wiggly because of how exasperated Moose gets. Yeah, credit to your steady hand, I guess.
Well, thank you. I really cannot draw a straight line to save my life. So I was like, okay. And when I was doing the my original style, which I still play around with, I would do watercolor and then color pencil on top of the watercolor and then some color pencil on top of that, and then I would scan it in and piece it together in Photoshop and then paint digitally on top of that. And it would take like 2 months to do a single illustration.
Gracious.
Yeah,
and
wow.
I was like, I've got to do well, and it still didn't look very good. So
After all that, it still was not even...
yeah, I was like, all right, I spent 3 months on this and it's still disappointing. So I was like, all right, if I'm going to be disappointed in myself anyway, I might as well speed up the process.
Let's just, like, tone it way back. Yeah.
Because it wasn't even like a stylish preference that would have forced your hand, or not forced your hand. What am I trying to say? It's not even like a preference for Disney to say, like, let's move away from this sort of watercolory process. It's a practical choice you're making to say, let's streamline things so that I can actually, turn this around.
Yeah, and then we had a really fast turnaround time too, and so I'm the king of second guessing myself. I will tweak stuff until the cows come home, but I didn't have the luxury of second guessing myself with the final art. So like I would do something like, that's gotta be good enough.
There's nothing like a deadline to force that part of you way down.
Yeah, but and
Totally.
in fact, I did a lot of visual research before I started working on the books. I even talked with an ecologist at Denali National Park because the scientists there have their emails. They're just public, so you can ask them questions.
This is very thorough. And his response
main...
is, "I'm sorry, ducks do not live on moose heads."
Yeah, right.
I reject your premise.
I'm going to get a second opinion, sir.
Yeah.
Originally, the books, Duck Moves In was supposed to take place during spring. He was like, oh, spring is here. What a beautiful day. But spring in Denali, it's snowy.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And so my main man, Carl, was like, you can't do that. There's snow everywhere.
Shout out to Carl up in Denali.
Yeah,
Thank you very
reality.
much.
Yeah.
And so we talked about some of the plants that would be in the ecosystem where the story takes place. If I remember correctly, it's the boreal lowlands. So there's black spruce, there's early budding Arctic lupine.
Those all sound very familiar to me. I spent a summer working in Alaska, not in
Really?
Denali. Yeah, but in McCarthy, Alaska, which is part of, like, it's right next to Kennecott, and it's part of, like, their only national forest up there. So, anyways, so I spent a summer up there, and all of that foliage sounds very familiar because we had to talk about, like, black bears and what they eat and when they come out, and, like, anyways. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and so then I was also, I should say, I was a Boy Scout, and we did summer high adventure in Alaska too. So I was very close to becoming a Alaskan river guide, but I went to classical music camp instead.
Wah, wah.
Those are like two ends of the tantrum. That's amazing. Where in Alaska were you?
We were in the Fairview area. So we were we ended on a trip to Denali, but we kayaked all over the place.
Cool. Yeah, very cool.
Man, that sounds amazing.
It was really incredible, and like I loved it. And so I was really excited to be able to like share Alaska with my family, and my wife was like, look at this stuff that we did. Yes, step on the tundra. It's really squishy. How cool is that?
Yeah. That's so cool. That's so cool. And whitewater rafting, I did like a bit of that when I lived in Northern California. I took a whitewater rafting class, and I considered being a guide for a minute until I was like, my brother and sister came to visit, and I took them like on a, like a private rafting tour because I could rent the raft from the college that I was taking the class at. And so we went down, and I was like, because I'm not a big person. I'm like 5'4". I don't, I'm like small. So like trying to maneuver and like steer a whitewater raft with like a bunch of people in it, I was like, oh God, it's getting away from me real quick here. Yeah, it was like, it's really fun to be like a part of, but like being in charge of, I was like, I think I'm just gonna be a participant. but all that to say, super fun.
Totally.
It's too bad though that these experiences were so long ago that you can't expense the
right.
cost
Yeah. I can't write off my high school trip. Yeah.
Right off. Yeah, you're like, I'd like to be reimbursed for my childhood experience.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to something you said about the deadline. Yeah, especially like early readers and graphic novels both, right, sort of fill that gap for like reluctant readers. And I know that editors, and I know this also because I have a 7-year-old kid who's like just a vivacious reader, and if I can't keep him in like new books and new characters, he gets bored. And then, then it's my problem again.
So please, can you make more of these? Is what?
Yes, please make more. But also, all that to say, though, I know that editors, when they acquire these, they often want to publish like 2 or 3 at a time, and then you have these really close deadlines for more because they're trying to capture, that kid for as long as they have, which is like a couple of years. So how did that play into it for you? Because I know you had 2 come out like pretty quick, and you said it was a 3-book deal. So that third one must be just around the corner, and then are there more? So I guess there's a lot to unpack there, but that's my
yeah totally. So you're spot on. The first 2 books came out at the same time on March 5th of this year, as kids tear through those books really quickly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The third book, which I just turned in edits on the final art for,
awesome,
is coming out on December 3rd, and I cannot believe how soon that's going to come out. So yeah. That's called Duck in the Dark, and it's about Duck and Moose are going to have a best friend / roommate sleepover, and they're going to watch a Mutant Mountain musical marathon. So all 6 Mutant Mountain musicals.
Awesome.
Except it gets dark really early in the winter. Duck happens to definitely not be afraid of the dark. He's not afraid of the dark at all.
Of course.
As you can imagine. And so right. he does things that a person who is not afraid of the dark would totally do the whole time.
That sounds awesome. And then just to follow up, are there more coming? Because it feels like that, 2 in March, 1 in December, they're like, Kirk, like, can we get, let's do this.
6 more
and
in March 2025.
And you're all like, I've got a hand cramp, like, please give me a break. Yeah. But anyways, just...
Yeah, well, keep your fingers crossed with me. So I sent pitches for, like, another 6 books to be like, look, so many more ideas. You all decide what you want.
Awesome.
How do you do
Nothing written, just sort of like spaghetti at the wall. Disney sort of pick if you want something, if you feel like something will fit. Yeah,
and so that's what I've done with all the books. So for any pitch for the book, except for the first one, they had the the book dummy. Right. So with the second one, I would draw a cover image, come up with a basic name, and then write a log line pretty much to be like, this is what the book is going to be about. So that's what Moose Blasts Off was. That Disney bought 3 books. They bought Duck Moves In. They bought the Moose Blasts Off book, but it wasn't called Moose Blasts Off. It was called Duck and Moose in space, because I'm unoriginal.
Yeah, a Space Moose spiff or something.
And then a third book to be determined. Whenever it was time to come up with ideas for the third book, I came up with pitches for like another story. I was like, all right, you tell me what you want. Tell me what you want me to do.
Did they pick you the one you wanted to work on most? I mean, we can say yes. We can say yes. Yeah,
yes.
There are a couple ideas that I would really like to do. I've re-included them in my pitches, so awesome, I'm not going to tell you all which ones they are, but maybe they'll come out.
We'll reveal.
We'll
later.
see.
I love that though, because I feel like for a picture book or early reader graphic novel, whatever, a pitch and a log line when you're sort of like into the series and you already have them hooked is sort of like your proposal, right? But it's like very like concentrated and like toned down, which is amazing because, we've talked to people who are like, oh yeah, I sold my middle grade on proposal. And I'm just like, how nice would that be, right? Like I wouldn't have to write the whole 40,000 words and like sell it. It's because they already know what you can do, right? And so you're like, okay, cool. Yeah, like I know that she can do this. This is what we want, whatever. But that synopsis and proposal package for a middle grade or a YA or whatever is going to be way more intense than just like a pitch and a log line. So all that to say, I love that that's sort of your proposal for, for the next one, because that's amazing. Like that's awesome. They know what you can do. And they're just like, yeah, we'll just like pick and choose. That's perfect. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I am working on a proposal for an older graphic novel series now. So
awesome.
Middle grade, end of elementary school, and it's much more intense. There's like a couple chapters sketched out. I'm working on a pitch deck for it now, so like a PowerPoint slideshow with concept art and character descriptions and.
Wow. Yeah. But so have you found then that working on this series with Duck and Moose has sort of afforded you the ability to pitch other stuff? Like even if it's a longer thing, it sounds like yes, like you can just sort of propose now because you have Duck and Moose to sort of be like, this is what I have worked on, this is what I would like to do.
I would hope so. I'm basically doing a book dummy version of the graphic novel, though. But instead of having the whole 200 pages in sketch form, it'll probably be like the first 50 pages, and then like final art on maybe the.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, but the Duck and Moose stuff has given me a lot more confidence in being able to build a pitch or put a pitch deck together, and to understand that it needs to be as good as I can make it, but I don't need to be incredibly precious about it because it's still just getting the idea across the table.
Yeah, totally. And I want to just highlight real quick too, so that I feel like that is something that is specific kind of to author illustrators anyways, right? Like you do have to kind of you do like if it's for a picture book, you do the dummy, but you only have final stuff for like the first couple, so that it's not like you're dummying out the whole thing and then they're like, no, actually, like whatever.
It's retooled every page, right?
Right. So I just okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Thanks for breaking that apart.
My book dummies have gotten more and more polished too as we've started sitting them out. So like I'll have final art for a cover idea, and I know it's going to change anyway. Final art for a cover idea. I try to get at least one big climax image, so like the thing that would go on a sales page, looks like it might be the hardest for me to illustrate. I try to get that done right away.
Smart, yeah.
The spread that has 1,000 ducks in it, or whatever.
Yes, yeah,
yeah. Hey everybody, quick break in the episode for us to get review bombed. Actually, Brenna and John have coordinated to do 2 very sweet reviews for the same book. And if you know the author of said book, you'll know why I in particular think this is sweet. So I'm going to get out of the way and I'll read these and then I'll offer a couple comments. Brenda's review for this week is for the hilarious, laugh out loud, pants are optional Naked, written by the esteemed Alan Mayfair and illustrated by the incredibly talented Gabby Moraes. Naked has it all. Punny humor, adventure, heart, and of course butt cheeks. Although there's only a couple of butt cheeks in full view in the book. Great for kids who love Captain Underpants and Dogman. Gabby's illustrations are the perfect complement to our heroic main character. This is a must-have for any home library, unless you're allergic to butts. That's my added phrase there. John wants to know if he's allowed to do a Naked review as well, because he is actually the publisher of Naked, and I am going to tell you, John, that you are allowed to review whatever the heck book you want. He says, too bad it's happening, and I agree. If you haven't had the pleasure of reading a cheeky bedtime story recently, then it's your lucky day, or at least it'll be your lucky day when you actually get a copy of this book. Naked offers more than just a heroic tale of a boy's mission to rescue his best friend. It's a story about passion and emotions and courage, and there is a seek and find at the end of this book. This is something that John typed in all caps, so he wants to make sure that if you do get this, you actually make it to the end of this relatively short picture book so that you can see the seek and find. John is back to his amazing rating scale. John gives this 10 secret roller skates out of 10, which is actually an Easter egg in itself. Look for some continuity between two of the Two-More Press books, Naked and you know what? I'll let you, if you're curious enough, I'll let you go back and see where the roller skate in Naked actually comes from. And a thank you to Brenna and to John for doing a review of this book on behalf of Alan Mayfair, the esteemed author, as Brenna puts it. This is incredibly sweet, and for this little book to have gotten any attention whatsoever and to have seen the light of day is, I can say, on Alan Mayfair's behalf. It's such an honor. So, thank you. Do you want to support the podcast? I think you do, because you've made it at least a half an hour into this episode. If you do, I would suggest that you go to linktree.com/verseshow or our website, verse.show, which is now up and running, also courtesy of Tealmore and John, for everything that you would need to know about our show, including stuff about Brenna and me and John, all of our old episodes, merch. You can get t-shirts. You can pledge to our sort of dusty old Patreon that doesn't have a lot of content in it. All these things, including shout outs that you can get where we will read whatever you tell us to read on the podcast, within some reasonable limits. You can find all that stuff on our Linktree, linktree.com/verseshow or verse.show as our website itself. Hey, I hope you are enjoying this conversation that we are having in right in the middle of now with Kirk Reedstrom, because it was a blast to have it. We sure yucked it up, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conversation. And so now I will get out of the way of your enjoyment thereof.
No, that's actually really smart, because it's like sneaking in extra art. You're like, actually, I can do this and this and this and this and this, and like here's it's just one, but like here's like a montage of like what I can do. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, I want to press on a point that I think that you've talked about in a roundabout way, and this is the responsibility of the illustrator to do things with the illustrations that are not discussed explicitly, that you are not explicitly being paid to do. You, as an illustrator, do not have to know the names of the trees that are in Alaska and what time the sun goes down, but you do that because your attention to detail and your, I guess, like a responsible treatment of the material dictates to you, even if we're not talking about, I don't know what you said, not a ficus, but whatever trees are.
Yeah, all those snake plants, the palm trees that line Denali National Park.
Yeah, right. And that's
coconuts. That's
an extreme, but you can go like generic tree, and it's still just as serviceable a story. But I guess there's a realism or a groundedness that it lends to the story if you are rooting it in really how the world works, even if it's kind of a zany, wacky setting, right?
Yeah, totally. And I didn't have it set in Denali at first. It was just a generic forest with generic-looking Christmas trees lining a generic-looking mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I was never really happy with the back. I also don't love drawing backgrounds either, so I was just like trying to finish it as fast as possible, and then I kept on looking at what I was doing. I was like, it's just not, it doesn't look quite right. And so then I thought, I was like, why don't I just stick it in Alaska? And then I was like, okay, well, what's actually there? And then I had to figure out if ducks actually live in Alaska too. Turns out they do, so that's good.
Okay, that's lucky for you.
Right. Yeah, well, and because the national park has so many apps now, they have a birding app and they have a flora and fauna app. So you can ID plants and stuff. So I just kind of like looked through. I was like, what looks like it will be around? But I should say I did all of the final art, and I didn't do set character designs for either of them because I knew they would kind of change, and I wanted to eventually have more of a shorthand for drawing the characters. But by the time I finished the final art for the first book, I realized that Moose's antlers are totally wrong. Like, moose antlers don't look like that at all.
Big chunky things. Yeah.
Yeah. With like C's going up at
with houses
at the top.
in between and ducks living
Yeah,
in
right.
them. Yeah, so.
And so I was like, well, I'm not changing that. We're just gonna call it style.
Nice, yes.
And so I tried to do I try to have a balance, but I liked being able to find a palette of colors because I could base stuff off of the real trees and the real background, the real grass that's there, instead of my idea of grass. Which I like to go. I like to go with that first, just to be like, okay, what is the Kirk Reedstrom idea of a tree? How is that wrong?
Platonic ideal, but in your
Yeah, totally.
And try to end up somewhere in the middle, so it doesn't look like totally realistic. It's not. We're not drawing photorealistic trees or anything like that. And in fact, the black spruce that I draw have gotten a lot wider as the books go on.
It's evolution, you know.
And yeah, no one's trimming those black spruce.
Yeah,
in the Duck and Moose books.
So I heard John Clausen talk semi recently, like about a year ago, through 12 by 12, and the talk he gave was just sort of mind blowing. The way that he explained like how he gets to his style, and so the takeaway that I had was what he said was he sort of like he doesn't like to draw faces. So like you had said, you don't like to do backgrounds, right? So he will, adapt to that or like avoid that at any cost, which sort of like, it gives him his style because he doesn't do faces. He does these other things. So you see like the back of the head or like the profile or like people going away or whatever. So I guess my question is, what do you like to draw, and like how do you sort of lean into that to account for not doing backgrounds? Because I find that so interesting. It's like the negative space of your creative process kind of like working for you. Like you don't like to do one thing, so you end up leaning really hard on this other thing, and it pushes it to like a new level.
Yeah, and would you be comfortable drawing John Clausen's faces if he drew your backgrounds?
You could.
Like we can see if we can make that work.
You could work out. You could work.
Call me John.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Have your people call my people.
Us too. We'll have you on the show. We could connect you.
There's the podcast has afforded us a shortening of the degrees of separation here, so we can.
It's
true.
Make that happen. We are happy to cash in on relationships and help people out. So yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this might be obvious, but I love to draw funny expressions. I love drawing funny faces, and I love drawing characters in motion. So, like, I really, when character designs come into play, a lot of times people will do turnarounds so you can see every angle of the character. I like to draw the character doing stuff because I also get bored really easily. I like to draw the characters doing a funny thing, so that way I don't get bored from just being like, okay, here's the 3/4 pose, and okay, here's the backside of them standing in the same pose, which is helpful if you're going to do like animation production, because somebody has to take your designs and turn them into like real production assets. But if I'm drawing everything myself, I can just entertain myself, and also try to do that with all the panels too. In animation, right, or in TV writing, people will do something called a punch up, right? So somebody will have a joke and then they'll try to punch it up so it's a little funnier.
Yeah.
So I don't draw my sketches are really rough, so that way I can come up with new ideas while I'm inking or while I'm drawing. So every step of the way, I try to add something that'll make me laugh.
Yeah, to like punch up your own artwork, essentially.
Yeah, so that's why Duck has a mug that says #1 Duck, and that's why Moose is drinking from a mug that says #2 Duck at the end of the book.
Gosh, why did I not? I don't think I picked that up. I love that.
My wife just noticed that the other day. And she was like, I've read this so many times. I was like, yeah. And like Duck is reading a paper. And I don't think anyone can actually read this, but on chapter 3, when he's on Moose's behind and reading a newspaper, the headline is "Flying V's are out, is Flying Q the new thing?"
Oh my god, awesome. That reminds me of my kid, and I know Josh also, they watch Gravity Falls at their house. There's one episode where, do you watch that show, Kirk?
Yeah, I love that show.
Yeah? Do you know the one where, it's the one with the miniature golf, and they're like, the little golf balls are like taking over. So it's with Pacifica, who, I mean, she's a ridiculous character, but Seuss has like read that she says V-necks are in, and he's like, I'm going to take it one further and do a W neck. The like sad like V in the middle just like slouches over. It's like so sad. And last thing about Gravity Falls, but our favorite line from that episode specifically is where Pacifica gets in at the end. They're giving her a ride home, and Mabel's trying to share with her, and she's like, haven't you ever shared before? And she's like, sharing? Like, it's so good. It's so good.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, that's what that reminded me of, if the V's are out and the Q's are in with the W neck.
Well, and again, anyway. I mean, that gets to the, like, okay, I'm going to swoop in with my more serious observation or question. I'm taking all the fun. Yeah. It is funny. Okay, so here's another, I'll root this in a silly observation. Do you know the cartoon, Pinky Malinky? It's on Netflix. Nobody else knows this cartoon.
Pinky Malinky?
Gosh darn it. He's an anthropomorphic hot dog. There are a full 4 seasons of it on Netflix. It's the most amazing cartoon I've ever seen, replete with these same sorts of things that we're talking about here, which is...
Write it down.
Two things. Yes, Finn would also love it.
Right.
When you're done with Gravity Falls.
Write it down.
2 things. Those unseen details that you sneak in, that... because these things are designed for kids to watch them over and over again, and their parents are always around, it becomes more like #2 Duck becomes more like here's an Easter egg for either my wife or the hopefully millions of parents that are going to read my book over and over again. That's observation 1, which I think it just makes everything so much richer when you can insert that into the experience of the book. But then also, and this is where the Pinky Malinky thing comes in. Not only is he an anthropomorphic hot dog, who is the biological child of human people with a recessive hot dog gene. So go watch this show because it's absolutely wild. But this gets back to, ridiculous antlers coupled with I don't know why I can't keep these species names in my brain. Real Alaska trees. Coupling that, like in the process of making a fully realized world, there are constraints on the preposterous. Like, you're making conscious choices to say, Duck and Moose are where the crazy stuff happens in a world where, other things are depicted cartoonishly, but also an analog of real life, right? So there's a bit of world building there.
Yeah. I have a very hard time staying grounded in all of my other story stuff too. So I thought it would be good to try to have the books take place in real life-ish scenario. So people who are listening to the podcast, I just looked up Pinky Malinky, and if you all, Josh and Brenna, if you saw my mouth just and my eyes brighten. It's amazing.
That
reminds me
of
good. one of my favorite shows growing up was a Mo Willems show that he will say only 5 people watch, because he started as a writer for Sesame Street.
I did know that. I didn't know he had a show though.
Yeah, it was called It was called Sheep in the Big City on Cartoon Network.
Oh my gosh.
It was about a sheep who's on a farm, and there were the two main antagonists was General Specific and Private Public. They had an angry scientist. He's not a mad scientist. He's an angry scientist who made a sheep-powered ray gun, but sheep was the only sheep that could fit into the ray gun. They didn't just find the sheep first, so they had to go capture sheep, and then sheep left the farm to go into the big city to go into hiding, and every episode ended with a ranting Swede.
This is very high concept.
Yeah, wow, what is this show? How do you know how long it was on for? Like
it got canceled in the middle of the first season, I think.
What a bummer. Sorry, Mo. Wow.
Mo's career has recovered, I believe.
Yeah,
he's okay. He's doing
okay.
fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, they realized that standards and practices had stopped reading scripts when they came in. So they were like, how can we just want to start getting away with stuff. And so they would have these fake commercials interspersed throughout the show. And one of the commercials was for a bubble gum, and the flavor was extra mint. And so the characters started saying, it's like I'm tasting extra mint.
Extra mint.
The extra mint is in my mouth.
It's so seamless. And most gum is mint flavored. So it's just this tiny step that you Also, standards and practices, that's hilarious. They probably thought
they're like, there's no punchline here. Approved.
Yeah, right? Or they probably thought, oh, we're going to cancel this show pretty soon anyways. We're just going to, put our energy somewhere else.
Whatever.
And then they just didn't, they didn't think anyone would notice. Wow.
So speaking, here's the connective tissue with, we talked about comics. Would you... This is maybe a dumb question. Would you love a Duck and Moose cartoon? Is this a career goal of yours? Do you design with those sorts of end goals in mind? Do you have these sorts of conversations with Anna?
Yeah. Okay. So you all might not have known this, but I interned with William Joyce when I was in college. So Bill, right? Roly Poly Oly, George Strink, Smith Robinson's Guardians of Childhood, the other movie Epic that was based off of The Leafman and the Brave Good Bugs. So I went to a teensy tiny liberal arts college in Shreveport, Louisiana, where I still live now, called Centenary College, and Bill was the resident artist. So he had a studio up above the admissions building, and more than anything, I wanted to become Chuck Jones or Bill Watterson.
Amazing!
Aim high, man.
Yeah. And so I also was a musician. I played bass guitar and violin, and I thought the responsible move would be to double major in classical violin performance and studio art, because you don't have to choose when you go to a liberal arts college.
Yes, right, the responsible move. Because if it wasn't that, the irresponsible thing would have been to major in whitewater rafting, and we know how that went.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I realized the classical world wasn't for me after I finished my sophomore qualifiers. I stayed on so I could keep all of the scholarship possible, and then picked up the communications degree so I could have some sort of hireable skill set.
Totally.
But Bill was the resident artist, and I got to intern with him. I had many senior years of college. I took the long and winding road, but my first senior year, I interned with Bill. And that was when, at the tail end of the Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lessmore, the animated short that ended up winning an Oscar. I had nothing to do with it winning an Oscar, but I printed a whole lot of DVDs and mailed them out to festivals. But
cool.
You take a little bit of credit. You had a role.
I saw... I got to see a small studio, but I also realized that I really like to jump around and do a little bit of everything. I thought I would want to go into storyboarding or something like that, and then I was like, well, I really want to just work on my own ideas. So I ended up leaving college because of some family illnesses. So I moved back to Houston, where I was born and raised, worked in the tech industry for a hot second, and really wanted to get back into books. or storytelling, and I didn't quite know how to do that. So I got a job at my local independent bookstore, like little neighborhood bookstore. It's like 1,000 square feet and looks like the bookstore from You Got Mail. It's called Blue Willow Bookshop, and Valerie, the owner, was on the board of the American Booksellers Association, and they do hundreds, like 300 to 400 author visits every year. So I got to meet all of my heroes, like John Cheska, Mac Barnett, Dan Santat.
My gosh, wow.
I mean, so many. Kevin Hinkes, too. He was lovely. Lauren Long. I got to do Judith Viorst.
There's a horrible in there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's at least one horrible in there. And so I got to see how all of these authors interacted with kids, and I got to see them do their presentation. I read tons and tons and tons. And then I thought, okay, I want to go and get my master's in creative writing, and realized I don't have my undergraduate degree.
Whoopsies.
I need to finish college.
I had 6 or 7 senior years, but I never.
Yeah, yeah. It's we were a cool 9 this time. It was like 7 years actively in school. So I moved. Me and Van Wilder, right? So
yeah, totally nice.
I moved back to Shreveport, connected with my now wife. I graduated and we got married, and then from Blue Willow on, I knew books is really where I wanted to be. But to answer your actual question, Josh, totally. If somebody wanted to make an animated Duck and Moose show, I would be all for it. You know, Nickelodeon, DreamWorks, Disney Plus.
Yeah, right.
And
y'all know where to find me.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that it took that pointed and specific goal question to sort of cover the fact that you come from this. Like, this is you came from books, but you also came, as much from the animation space and thinking in terms of the commercial production of art too. So yeah, sorry it took us an hour to explore your actual bio and background. We'll reorder this in the final product.
I worked all over the place. So, like, I worked in tech, I worked in local advertising, and that was my first job after I actually graduated from college. I got so sick of making billboards for local dentists and injury lawyers that I moved over to Barnes & Noble, the local Barnes & Noble here, to be, I was the city and business development manager for Northwest Louisiana, because our Barnes & Noble is the only new, so not used, non-college bookstore in a 2.5-mile radius. So I would drive all over the 3-state area trying to sell dictionaries and STEM toys to schools. Then I moved into the nonprofit space where we were cradle through career. So we did early childhood brain development, career placement, STEM stuff. We sent around 100 volunteer readers into 3rd grade classrooms around our parish, our county, to read with kids to get their reading scores up. I ended up training with the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities to be something called a primetime storyteller, which is where you kind of go to community groups and you read aloud and you talk about humanities subjects behind the books.
That feels like a great title to add to one's bio for school visits. I'm just going to write that down.
Yeah. And now I work for the public library system for our parish during the day. So I'm the social media and digital services manager. That means I post the funny memes and I help everybody download their very first ebook and audiobook. So I'm on the phone a lot at telling people, okay, tell me what your screen looks like. Okay,
yeah,
do you see the little gear icon in the top right corner?
Oh my gosh.
We're gonna click that.
That's like the perfect pairing of all of your skill sets, right? Because it sort of brings you back to tech a little bit, because you're like, what do you see on your screen, right? Like sort of like a little help desk, like tech
giving
action.
Back to people.
But also,
books.
Right? But with books, I mean, I love that. I feel like you must be so much like happier / like satisfied, like more, I don't know, it just feels more like, it's sort of like in line with like what you're doing.
Yeah, it's really I mean, when it's still a day job, but it is really fun. And so, like, I get to travel around the county, or in Louisiana we have parishes, right? So I travel instead of counties. So I travel around the parish, taking pictures of performers and neat things that are happening in the branches. The Caddo Parish has the biggest student art festival in the South. It's called Art Break. And so during the school week, we have every single second grader in Caddo Parish Public Schools, and some surrounding school districts and private schools will go to our Shreveport Convention Center, do huge crafts activity, watch music performers, dance. But the marketing department, which I'm in, has to perform a picture book every year. So I've been the Happy Ladybug. I have lip synced to Idina Menzel in front of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of second graders. Now I know how to floss.
Oh, nice. More bio.
Yeah.
Fodder, right? Add that.
There's a lot of scrolling on your LinkedIn page.
Yeah.
Do you get to do your own? Or will you?
My own books?
Yeah.
I do not want to have an ethics violation, so I try to keep my writing as separate as possible from library work. But I did get to we have a children's book festival, so I waived my fee, so I got to be an author at the children's book festival, which was super fun.
Cool.
And I'll do programs every now and then, or like July is Graphic Novels and Libraries Month. Last year I had a bunch of local artists choose their favorite comic book character in our system and make a piece of fan art and write a blurb about why they liked it so much. And so we made a big display of like the book that people could check out, and then their art, and
it was
awesome. Fun. It's super fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. I mean, and like Josh said, it took us an hour to get to uncover all of this, but I mean, amazing. Thank you so much for being so candid with your background.
Well, and I should say my coworkers didn't know that I drew until like months before I got the book.
How?
Well, you've done a great job.
Absolutely shocking that must have been.
Separate.
Yeah.
Wow. They're like, wait, you do what? I was like, my secret hobby. It's out in the world now.
Yeah, right.
You should
like
know
it's actually
you may
on our
see
shelf.
this. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, amazing. So, Kirk, do you have a date for the third book coming out in December, or is it just sort of December?
Yes, December 3rd is the
3rd.
on-sale date. Uh-huh.
Okay.
And in fact, I am overdue for posting the cover image because it's out. So it is available for pre-order now. So everybody go pre-order Duck in the Dark.
Awesome.
Wherever books are sold.
And then also buy the other two books, which just came out a couple months ago.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, everybody pre-order Duck and Moose and look for the third one, December 3rd, which honestly, this episode might come out close to that release period. So that would be great. So we can kind of try to coincide with the book coming out.
Oh, yeah, great. Perfect.
So awesome. But thank you so much for coming on. This has been really fun. And I'm glad we finally got to chat about Duck and Moose. I love those books.
For sure.
Yeah. Oh, me too. It's been such a treat. Thank you.
Thanks for listening this week.
Find all of our episodes and other associated links and information at linktree.com/verseshow.
Or reach out to us on Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see you next verse.
Bye.